Okay, the problem statement is to calculate the employee salary. So the output is clear that we need a salary output. Now there are some certain things that you will need to calculate the salary. Your paper will include the detail of the input or detail of the procedure, and then based on the procedure then you will have to manage the input. Now these are just the details about the algorithm. It might not be provided like this. So what could be written: to create a pseudocode program to calculate the salary of an employee. So this is the main purpose of the program. Now based on the number of hours that they have worked and their hourly rate. So these are the two things that you will need in to calculate the salary. So this would be the input. The program should prompt means the output. So output message is created to input the employee's name. So this should be the first input. The reason, because at a time you will be calculating one employee salary, so the first input should be about the employee's name. Then it would be the number of hours worked and the hourly rate. These two things you will need to calculate the salary. It should then calculate the salary considering overtime pay for hours worked beyond 40 hours and display the employee's name and the final salary at the end. So this is the final result or the final output. Now if there is any kind of such calculation, they will explain it in the question and how it would be calculated. If it is not, then of course per hour rate would be multiplied by the number of hours worked, and if there is overtime, then there might be just simply some additional hours. Now for that there is the calculation formula written over here. So these are the steps. Ask the user to enter the employee's name. This would be output, and then the input. Prompt the user output, the number of hours, input, output, and then input. And then based on that we have two ways. Of course that would be below 40 hours and then above 40, more than 40 hours. So 40 hours and less, calculate the salary. So this is, we know the general formula. And for more than the 40 hours, we have 40 into hourly rate plus hours worked minus 40, because this would be additional hours, multiply by the hourly rate, multiply by 1.5. So basically you might not get exact formula like this, but you will be told what is the rate, hourly rate. It could be the double of the original hourly rate, or it, in this case, this is a multiple of 1.5 considering the overtime rate. And then at the end display a message that includes the employee's name and the calculated salary. Now for the input, we have three variable names, three variables that you would need. You need a proper identifier for that. You can create identifier table if you want, especially if it is not mentioned in the program to have, then you don't need to do that. But you should know how to have an identifier table. In the identifier table you will have the name of the variable, and then you will write the data type, and then you will write the description. Description means that why do you need this variable. Now the first thing is the employee name. As I said before, that you should have the identifier appropriate for the job it is supposed to do. So the employee name, by the name it is clear that it will store the name of the employee. Declare is the keyword for the pseudocode to declare. Then you will write the identifier, and then the colon sign, and then the data type of it. So this declaration should be the first thing in the program. Okay, so first is the declaration of all the variables. Then hours worked, it would be an integer. There is no if it is integer, then of course this is not going to be like 0.5 or 0.2, 0.25 like this. So hours worked is going to be an integer input, then hourly rate is going to be an integer input as well. Again, if it's not mentioned, you can use the real, you can use the rate. It could be in decimal, so it could be real, but right now this is not clear and this is not mentioned in the program, so you can use integer and real, both will be correct in this case. Salary would be real. Now why the salary would be real? Because the hourly rate that we need to calculate here is 1.5. So 1.5 multiplication will always result in a decimal point answer. So the salary is going to be a real data type. These two could be real or could be integer, both will be fine in this case. Then after the declaration, the first thing I've told you before that, sorry, I need to, okay, so the first thing was the declaration, and then after declaration you need the input if it is required from the user, and then after the input you will have the process, that would be the calculation of the salary, and then at last you will going to have the output. Now these three parts of a program, they make up a program. If there is no input from the user, there will be the input somehow, in a sense that either you will assign literal values to the variables that you are going to use, or you can going to use maybe direct values in any kind of calculation. So in any kind of calculation there is some value coming. For example, over here we know the hours worked, we know the hourly rate, so even 2 multiplied by 4, it gives you the result 8. So multiplication is the process, 2 and 4 is going to be the input, and 8 is the output. Always and always these three parts are going to be there. Even if you feel that there is no input coming from the user, now the user is the one who is going to be using your program. You are working as a computer, going to think as a computer, what do you need from the user to work. So in this example you need this, the employee name, hours worked, and hourly rate. Okay, so the input, the employee name, comma, employee name. This is another way that you can use the input keyword. Input is the keyword that you have to use for the input from the user. Now you can divide this single line into 2 lines with output enter hours worked and then input hours worked. Both are going to be correct. But in this way, when you need the input and you need a prompt message as well, this is a prompt message. When we run a program, then this is going to be a message that will be displayed on the screen. And then when you enter something from the keyboard, like over here, the user, whoever is using the program, this employee name might be entered by the user. And then the next, the user will see the message enter hours worked. Then the hours worked, 10 hours, 40 hours, that will be entered. And then the third would be the hourly rate for the program. Input, hourly rate would be entered. Now what we have here is the main part of the process. You know that we have two conditions in this case. If the hours worked are greater than 0, that is for the overtime, or you can have the salary as the multiplication is we don't use the set keyword. Most of the pseudocode programs they do use this, but we are not going to use it as per the Cambridge pseudocode guide. Now you can exchange the statements over here. Exchange means that you can exchange the conditions as well. If hours worked, drawing is very difficult. If hours worked is less than equal to 0, so this is the first condition. In the first condition, when we have the salary assigned as hours worked multiplied by the hourly rate that was input. Okay, else, now in this case else would mean more than 40, so which in this case the answer is the conditions are reversed. Both ways are correct. What's important is that the condition follows the proper pathway, you can say. You have done the flowchart, you know that you can exchange the yes no decision boxes as well. Okay, when you change the condition, the yes no condition boxes changes, condition paths changes. Why? Because this has to be true, this has to be the salary calculation above 40. So if you are using this in else, then you are going to exchange this in the else part. Remember, you can exchange the conditions. It's not like your friend is going to write greater than 0 in the if, or less than equal to 0 less than equal to 40 in the if. Your calculation afterwards, what should happen afterwards, it should be according to the condition over here. Now the full calculation is written as was mentioned, and then we have output the employee name, as it was mentioned that it should output the employee name, then the hours worked, then the hourly rate, and then afterwards the salary. Okay, so this was a very simple example of an input, process and output. Now if the same thing you were supposed to do this in a module can be a procedure or a function. The difference is the function is going to return a value, and a procedure is not going to do that. Now I'm just going to move these lines. Sorry. Okay. Now if we are supposed to make the salary calculation in a function or in a module, so that module is going to take two things. Our calculation works with the hourly rate and the hours worked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function before everything. Okay, so we have a function. Let's write the name of the function. Now the name of the function and the name of a variable within a single program, it cannot be the same. Both are the identifiers. An identifier is something that you have to use to identify your program, your variable, whether it is a procedure or a function or a variable. So the function, in this case we are going to use a function, we are going to return a value. Or let's start with the procedure. The procedure does not return a value. Procedure salary, or we can write calculate salary. This is the camel case way of using an identifier, there should always be the square brackets inside the round brackets. Inside the round brackets you are going to include all the parameters or the information that your procedure needs to work. Now it needs hourly rate. You can change the name of the variable over here. This is going to be an integer. Now we need to declare it over here because it would be used as this variable inside the procedure. We're going to do this in detail when we do the programming, but right now I'm just going to tell you one thing. Whenever a procedure takes any variable, it is not using the exact variable that you are sending it. For example, when we use the call, then you're going to send it the hourly rate, but it will be used as rate inside that procedure. Let's see over here, we have the rate and the hours. I'm going to reduce it so that to use a different name. So they have two parameters, the rate and the hours. Every parameter needs to be defined or declared. This is kind of a declaration for the module over here. Now procedure does not return a value, so we are going to do the outputs over here because we will do the salary calculation, and because I cannot use it outside this procedure, then of course I will need to do it over here. So end procedure. Of course when you are writing it on paper, you are going to do it at the end, so be very careful and remember to do this. Now I'm going to just take the lines that are going to be used inside that procedure. So we have here declare salary, because the salary is going to be calculated inside the procedure, so it needs to be declared over here. Declared salary, and then the here we left the end if. Let's erase this. Okay, yes, something is stuck, so I cannot open the menu bar. Anyway, so we have the declaration for the salary. We're going to use the same thing. So salary is calculated over here, and then we have the end if. Now after the end if, the outputs, everything should be inside over here as well, because now why it should be in the procedure. 1 minute. The reason that it has to be inside the procedure, because we cannot access the salary outside of this procedure, because we declared this salary inside this procedure. This is now I'm going to insert a comment. I have told you that it explains the code. Okay, so a comment over here just to explain that this is a local variable. Local variable means that this salary is only accessible to this procedure, this salary variable. I declared it inside the procedure. If I try to use it outside the procedure, the program is not going to recognize, because it was not outside the procedure. We will do the global and local variables later on, so you will understand more about that Later on, if we need to access it, then we need to declare a global variable. That means it is accessible everywhere. Now because it is not accessible outside this function, so that is why we will have to do the output of the salary inside over here. We can do these three outputs outside and just output, but for that I'm going to have to explain to you about the program flow. We did one thing. One programming construct is one programming feature is a sequence. Sequence means one by one it is going to run the lines. Now whenever you are writing a procedure, basically the program does not start from there. It is only accessed when it is called. Right now, if it is over here, if it is not being called, then it will not be run. The computer will not know that there is something over here, because we have not called it. For example, you have done string functions, mid, length, left, right. When you use them, then only they are going to work, they are going to run. They are not going to run without calling them. Okay, these are just like the students who don't say anything without asking. Okay, let's delete everything. So now when the program is run, this is the first statement and it's going to run 1. I'm going to write the line numbers with it. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then the inputs. Then we moved our procedure over there. Now the thing is, I want to call my procedure. So the procedure does not return any value. There's another thing that was different. So how to use this procedure? You're going to write the call keyword. Call calculate salary, and you must send it the information that it needs. The first parameter, it has to be according to the order yet you mentioned over here. The first was rate and then the hours. So you have to send the hourly rate, comma, hours worked. Now before this, before the calculation, because you will not see anything on the screen of the of your program, of whatever you are doing. I have sent you that pseudocode.pro, so you can use the same thing. I will show it to you afterwards. So only the output you are going to see, whatever you output. So before this program, for example, let's do the output, because we need to output the employee name. See, this is coming the other way. Okay, this space would mean that whenever it is output, there would be a space between after a colon. So we have this employee name, and then we have the hours worked, and then the hourly rate. So hours worked would be the variable over here. Now these two codes mean that this string will be displayed as it is, and if you're writing anything without the quotes, that means this is kind of a variable name. So when it encounters something outside the quotes, it is going to check for the variable. If it doesn't find, then it will going to be an error. Now after these outputs, I'm going to call the calculate salary. So it will be something like this. These are the lines numbers that I am writing according to the sequence of the program. 7, 8 and then 9, and then it's going to run this. When it runs, it's going to go over here. This would be 11, 12, so 13 if you write this, or maybe this one, 15, and then last is going to be the output. As I said, there would be no output for the process, only output over here. Okay, first we have looked at how to use the procedure module. Now I'm going to replace this with a function module. Remember one thing about the function, that it is going to return a value or return one variable. Now this is just a difference with the keywords. Function and end function, everything will remain the same. You will use the identifier and you will use the parameters as it is. The only thing additional would be, like, after the parameters, outside the bracket, you are going to write returns. Okay, returns, and then the type of the variable is going to return. Now in this case, so instead of the salary, if we don't want to output it inside the function, we will return it to the main program. So we are going to write over here real, because that is a real data type. Now over here, instead of the output, I'm going to write return. Now here it will be return. In the function header, in the module header, it's going to be returns. So this is the function now. Now because the procedure does not return any value, so we use the keyword call, but the function returns a value and we need to assign that value somewhere. So we can have you can have the same variable name as well, but just for the ease of the use, we are going to use another variable, calculated salary, and the same way we are going to use the assignment operator, and we are going to, now this is the call of the function. We are going to call the function over here, and then we are going to send the value same as it is and was in the procedure. Now there we did not do any calculation, output. So over here we are going to do the output. Now I will also show you another way, that instead of saving this in a variable, you can directly do the output over here. So here we are going to have the salary output and the name of the variable salary, calculated salary. Now there is one thing that we can say, that this is a redundant variable. Redundant means that it can be considered useless, because we are just saving it over here and we are just using it for the output. If you don't need the variables in any other calculation, in any other process, you can directly output it. It's better, you can say, better processing or better efficient program that way. So it's kind of the the maths, you replace the x and y variable with their calculated values. So I'm going to take this function call and replace the name of the variable with the direct function call. So this statement will not be needed. Now output salary, we can have the function. This is the call of the function over here. Remember, we don't use the keyword call because it is giving us a value. Now this value over here will be directly displayed. Now let's do this in the program over here. Now in this side, we are going to replace our we have Instead of the procedure, I'm going to write the function. Function over here. Okay, one more thing. According to the Cambridge guide, we have to use the output and the input statements separately. Now in the Cambridge book, we have seen it being together with the prompt message in the using the input, but according to the guide and according to all the marking schemes, the previous marking schemes that were released, the output and the input have to be separate. So I have separated it over here, and if you're using this site for the compilation of the pseudocode to see the result, you will have to use it separate, otherwise it will give you an error. So function and end function, and I'm going to do over here returns and then returns real, and here I'm going to write return salary, and in the output statement we are going to write another output statement over here. Output calculated salary colon space and then calculated salary hourly rate and hours worked. Now this function call should replace with the actual calculated salary. Now let's run this. Enter the employee name, hours worked. Now when I told you whenever you write any condition, you should check it for all the scenarios. So let's do this with the 40. So it should give us calculated salary. There is nothing over here. Now why is not there anything? Because we have error, I think, over here. There was no comma. I hope that it should, yes. So now it gives us the calculated salary as 400. Is it 400 hourly rate? Hourly rate, see, that's the mistake over here. So hourly rate, I am just outputting the hours worked as well. So hourly rate. So anyways, calculation was correct, 14 to 10. Now let's do one calculation for maybe 50 hours. Hourly rate, we have 550. So this is kind of an overtime calculation. Now this will be the actual screen, output screen, result screen. Enter employee name, this would the input. Enter hours worked, this was the output, and 50 was the input. Enter hourly rate, this was the output over here, and input hourly rate. And then we have the output employee name. As you can see, there is a space after the after colon because we added space over here. Hours worked, hourly rate, and then the calculated salary. I hope this makes everything clear when you use the procedure and when you use the function. So what is the difference in that?